and welcome to Green Shoots. I'm Ajita Jain. On this show, we give you insight about the escalating world of startups, their activities, and expansions. Today on our show, we have with us Mr. Sanjay Shah, who's the CEO of Wadhwani Foundation for India and Southeast Asia, and the global head for the technology platform. Wadhwani Foundation has been in existence for long with the primary mission of accelerating job creation in India and other emerging economies. A very warm welcome to you, Sanjay.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to have you here. Since your foundation is playing a very significant role in job creation with its operations in 20 countries, what are the special initiatives that you would like to talk about that are being taken by your foundation?
Sure, Ajita. I mean, our three flagship initiatives are one is one is called the Wadhwani Advantage, which is a program that is specifically for SMEs, where we help diagnose and transform the transformation journeys of SMEs to help them to grow from 2x to 10x. And we help them in two different ways. One is a focused approach where we actually our team gets involved in the diagnostic process. We involve external consultants if needed, and then we go ahead and transform. We create transformation charters for the SMEs and then help to implement these transformation charters, thereby creating growth for them and, of course, in turn, creating jobs for the SMEs. Here we focus on SMEs that are doing more than 75 crores in revenue. But for the SMEs that are less than 75 crores in revenue, we have a do-it-yourself platform where we allow SMEs to come in and learn and develop themselves and go through the same sort of a journey in a slightly more help desk fashion, where we actually provide them with help through our platform. The second major initiative is what is known as Wadhwani Entrepreneur, where we help aspiring startups and aspiring students, and they can be college students, pre-college students, or post-college students, professionals, where we again help them to imbibe the culture of entrepreneurship and learning how to build a startup. We take them through a whole process of creating a practice venture and then a real venture, and then finally help them to get commercially suited into one of the incubators and develop their startup as they go along. Here we also have another program. This is called our NEN program, which is National Entrepreneurship Network, and that's been a flagship program that we've been running for a while. So that's the two programs that are flagship programs. The third one, which is also a very large program, it's called Wadhwani Opportunity, which is all about skilling students and giving them skills that the colleges and schools don't provide, but the industry requires. And in this particular program, our aim is to actually skill 25 million students into being able to seek industry-seeking jobs, competitive jobs, in a variety of different verticals in the next 10 years. In the first two programs that I mentioned, our idea is to create 10 million jobs over a course of the next 10 years. So these are our flagship programs. We have other programs also called Wadhwani Institute of Technology and Policy and certain other ones where we provide grants and funds to run these programs. But yeah, these are our key programs right now.
Great. So how do you see the scenario for startups, especially in post-COVID times, their survival rate and their success quotient?
Yes, I think that is a good question, and I think as you know, during the COVID times, the success that the startups have seen is actually tremendous, right? I mean, there was an initial phase and a patch where startups ran through a lot of issues and problems, but I think eventually they got over that, and they figured out ways in which they were able to maneuver these challenges that they were facing. So in terms of if you look at increasingly many of the traditional and legacy corporations are also looking at startups today as part of their own risk management strategy, right? I mean, for example, Hero Motor Corp, they actually heavily invested in Ather Energy, which is an electric scooter manufacturing startup. And this kind of allows this company to dilute their business risk that is created from their traditional automotive offerings, which are limited to fuel sources, and then move on to something totally radical and disruptive in nature. So I think what has happened is post COVID, one of the things that startups have learned to do is number one, they've learned to become very adaptive in nature. If you think about many of the Indian startups itself, they've learned from other successful new businesses that are there worldwide to build more effective offerings. I mean, for example, Paytm, which was really going through some tremendous number of challenges during the COVID times, launched their Paytm mini programs along the lines of WeChat to really create a hyper local commerce platform. And that now, of course, hosts brands like Fasos and Zoomcar and Tracto, etc. What it has also taught startups to do is their agility in response, right? I mean, obviously, change is inevitable, and sometimes, and it's often unexpected also. And the pandemic has actually demonstrated that, of course. And most of the effective risk strategy for any organization is to really create a culture that fosters rapid adaptation to evolving situations. For example, again, an example of a company that did quite well during the COVID-19 pandemic times, Pharmacy. Pharmacy is the company that supplies, medicines, and it becomes your local pharmacy, which supplies you, medicines at a very short notice. And it is India's largest healthcare delivery platform today. It managed to provide safe and contactless delivery of medicines across India, um, and then that greatly reduced stress on the healthcare infrastructure, and that was already overstressed at the time. It also came up with some innovative models around not only just managing that aspect of it, but also providing COVID tests. Somebody would come home and give you a COVID test at a very reasonable price. The third thing that it has also taught startups to do is to create a collaborative approach. I think, and this collaborative approach has been synonymous to the Silicon Valley, right? But it has come into India in a very big way. People are ready to share what they are doing, take advice and information, and do collaboration with other startups and investors, etc., without trying to be very protective about their ideas and what they are trying to do. So collaboration is also very useful when dealing with government policies, for example. A lot of times, just being a member of the NASCOM really helps critically in shaping the future policy to become more relevant and constructive for the startups, and therefore, reducing the compliance risk. It has also taught startups to be very proactive. Certainly, the reactive policies require a greater investment of time, and then often become very inefficient in nature. And startups really cannot afford either of that. So one, there has been more and more proactive policies that are emerging, and I think one has to be able to identify these emerging opportunities and capitalize on them early.
So, do you
And
see
this
a need to strengthen the startup ecosystem in India?
So yes, certainly. I mean, there is always a need to strengthen it further from what it is right now. But I must say that from where I started, I myself have been a startup guy for I've done 6 startups in my lifetime, and the next one that I wanted to do was an impact-driven startup. And Dr. Romesh Wadhwani, who is actually the one who's funding the entire foundation, came up and then basically we talked about it, and he said, what is the best impact driven startup that you can run than actually running the Wadhwani Foundation here in India? And I took it on from him. But yes, part of the reason that I took this on is because of the ecosystem in India that was very fledgling only 10 years back. Today, the ecosystem is, I would say, very well served. We have lots and lots of angel funds that are emerging. We have not too many local VCs, but there's plenty and more VCs that are global VCs that have taken a lot of interest in India. um, um, Tiger, SoftBank, you name it, all of them are here in India today. We have a very well served ecosystem, even in terms of the number of platforms that are now available for startups to learn and educate themselves and also to get funded. There are accelerators that a number of different corporates have started, Google accelerators and the Microsofts of the world, and most organized large corporates have started their own accelerators to help out startups. We also have platforms such as Let's Venture, where it's a platform that where startups and investors come into one single platform, learn from each other, figure out startups get an opportunity to demo their wares and pitch to the investors, and in a very collaborative way, multiple investors can go out and fund a particular startup. So I would say that it is very well served today, but of course there are multiple changes that are required in terms of policies and in terms of legal issues that startups face that are
I'm
still
sure you must have observed some roadblocks as well in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, what are your suggestions to build a strong fundamental value and profitability in business?
so if you just think about some of the roadblocks that most startups today face. Perhaps, obviously, the government has created some policies that are very favorable to startups, which is, significantly exempting them from taxes and stuff like that for some years. However, taxation of stock options, for example, is rather too complex. Levies that are there on investments and capital gains made by some of the early stage investors can also do with a lot of easing, and there needs to be more clarity over there. Tax reforms are very much needed. Legal issues, for example, when I was doing my last startup, one of the biggest challenge was that for everything that I was trying to do, it made a lot more sense to incorporate myself in the US. So a lot of startups have been incorporating themselves. They start off in India, but they incorporate themselves in the US or in Singapore or some of the other friendlier countries. And that's a huge loss to India, right? I mean, you've got not only startups moving out of India, only the back end work then happens in India. A majority of the front end selling, etc., happens outside the country. And a lot of the investments then come outside the country too. So India needs to ease up a lot of rules around that, because issues around round tripping and all of that become a big burden for a variety of startups. And the other issues, of course, are long drawn processes around registration of patents and trademarks and lack of incentives for research and development, etc., which a lot of the outside countries have done.
Yeah, true. As we talked about the post-COVID era, what are the priorities for startups and MSMEs for recovery, and what policies are required to ensure a resilient and inclusive recovery?
So I think in terms of if we're talking about MSMEs, they obviously face two challenges. One, they face two challenges during the COVID times. One was, of course, around survival challenges. The pandemic really tested the survival capabilities of even the best in class small businesses. Many crucial sectors got severely hurt over there, including real estate, entertainment, hospitality, as we all know about it. But many of the smart and agile business owners restructured their models in order to really be categorized as essential and thus managed to survive. The second challenge always has been the growth challenges, and in a lot of the industries did manage to actually benefit from the pandemic and grew exponentially. For example, on the pharma side, on the healthcare side, on the groceries, essential goods, online education, some of the digital SaaS products, online delivery services, and gaming, all of them had blockbuster growths that happened during the pandemic time, and so that was really good. But the strategic areas that one needs to now focus on is recovering some of the lost revenues, rebuilding their operations, rethinking the organization, and really accelerating the adoption of digital solutions. And when it comes to policies, short-term support measures are around relieving tax burdens that are there on the MSMEs, extending debt financing, and employment support are absolutely needed and need to be continued even post COVID. Yet at the same time, it's also important to sort of invest in long-term structural policies such as digital and financial inclusions, as well as creating this whole entrepreneurial skills capacity development. Because a lot of the problem is around we just don't have the right skills. I mean, students come out of colleges and schools, and we just don't have the right skills that the industry needs. So there's got to be this bridging of the gap between what the industry requires versus what our colleges and schools are providing. And that really needs to be immediately solved.
Correct. So, how do you ensure the sustainability of the Indian unicorns and their business models?
Okay, so I think obviously a lot of the unicorns, there has been an over exuberance that has happened, during COVID and post COVID because of the tremendous amount of inflow of monies that happened. And if you think about just the wave of the unicorns, right? We just clocked the 100th unicorn as of the start of May 2022, and obviously there has been tremendous surge in the number of unicorns. I mean, we had a total of almost 44 startups that entered into the unicorn club just over the course of the this particular year. But when it comes to sustainability of these unicorns, it all boils down to a simple thing. If a company can take care of its unit economics, so that so that when they are ready to scale, um, it becomes a smooth path to growth. I think where the problem is that most of these companies don't have their unique unit economics sorted out, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and it's not an easy thing to happen very quickly and easily. But I think it's very important that people start focusing on the unit economics, because very successful IPOs like Zomato and Paytm, etc., are all undergoing huge losses, and that's not a good thing, because the fundamental unit economics has not been figured out, and the revenue model has not been figured out. So I think the sustainability of the Indian unicorns is really dependent on the revenue models, and getting down to back to the drawing board and figuring out their unit economics.
So, your final thoughts on the way forward, Sanjay?
So I think the way forward is, I think we have a tremendously active and vibrant ecosystem that is out there. I think it is a well-served ecosystem. And I'm talking about the startups, not about the MSMEs, but I'm talking about the startups. I think we need to create more and more of these startups. We need to imbibe the culture of entrepreneurship into our students that are coming out of colleges, and schools, right from at the grassroots levels. I mean, even at 11th and 12th grade, students should start understanding what startups is all about, because that's the path to job creation. We also need to make sure that we continue to create policies and infrastructure for these startups to be able to thrive and survive. We also need to make it provide enough and more incentives to the investors, not just within India but outside of India, that we have enough incentives for them to come in and fund our startups here in India. And then of course, MSME is another ball game, which requires a bunch of policy reforms. And while we are on the right path under the current government, there is a need for expediting all of this in a faster manner.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. This was quite an informative session with you. Thank you so very much for those insights. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, and pleasure to be here talking with you today. Thanks.
Thank you. So that's all we have in this episode of Green Shoots. Do keep watching Fountain India TV for more information and useful information from the world of business. Thank you for watching.